Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. WeatherBrains episode number 851, 851. This is for, what day is this? This is the 9th of May, 2022. And you know what? I think where we are down here in the southern U.S., we can stick a fork in the tornado season. I think it's done. It's over. The death ridge has set in. So for folks that are tired of severe weather in our neck of the woods, that's a good thing. Obviously, there's some severe weather tonight going on in the northern states, but yeah, it's a good thing. Things are kind of nice and calm here, but let's get everything happening here, and let's see if we can do this without issues. Remember last week in the pre-show, it was a total technical disaster. I mean, we had FTP programs acting weird. We had emails bouncing to our regulars. The embed code worked just like that. So maybe this will not be a typical Monday here. So let's get everybody on the show here. And let me just, before we even invite anybody, I'm going to say this when the show starts. Tonight, we're going to have a meteorologist on the show that has made a transition from meteorology to politics. And we're going to, let me just say, I don't want anybody turning the thing off because he's a left wing or a right wing or a whatever. This is not going to be about politics. And if we get into if anybody even tries to go down the path of doing some hot button social political issue, I have the buzzer dusted off tonight. Yeah, so we can bring out the buzzer, and we're not going to talk about any of that stuff tonight. We're not endorsing anybody. I don't do politics. Long time people that know me, I don't do politics. I'm a no-winger. I don't fit anybody's box. I am a critical thinker, and I'm afraid in this country we have lost our critical thinking skills. We become just mindless lemmings that follow these right-wing and left-wing political idols, and people just don't think for themselves anymore. But anyway, so it's going to be about meteorology, and it's going to be about weather and his career and what's it like on the other side. That's the main interest to me, is that so a lot of people have just gotten out of the business, that they're burned out by the social media vitriol. They're burned out by, whatever, the hours, the challenges, the pressure. So anyway, just please don't turn it off. This will not be a show about politics, and I will not allow that. My finger will be quick tonight if anybody even ventures into that. And we know that we're not going to do that, but if anybody by mistake ventures into that, I will shut that mess off real quick. So just wanted to let you know up front. And again, we'll make that disclaimer once the actual show starts here in 5 minutes. And if you're new to this, and if you'd like to watch the actual produced show, move the slider over about 5 minutes, and you will be able to join us when the real program starts. But this is the pre-show. This is where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say pretty outrageous things from time to time. All right, so I think we've invited all of the regulars here, and then we'll get this thing started, our Monday night weather party. Yeah, we're May for us down here, it's a time where we transition out of this long tornado season. We have tornado season here from November through May. November through May, that's tornado season. And typically at some time in May, the ridge sets in, shunts everything north and west of here, and we move the emphasis from tornadoes to the tropics. Instead of looking to the west, we look to the south and see what's brewing in the Gulf waters or the deep tropics. And of course, obviously the big months are August and September, but you can have some early season systems that can be big rain producers and cause some flooding. So we are in the process of making that transformation here, and we will probably hit 90 where I am for the first time at some point in the next week. We've been flirting with it, but boy, some people hit it today. There's a pretty nasty heat wave directly under the ridge. And I know that parts of Oklahoma did triple digits, parts of Texas. And I do weather for stations in parts of Missouri and Illinois, and they're going to do 90 for the first time this year underneath the ridge. So for a lot of folks, that ridge is setting in, effectively shutting down the severe weather season. All right, Bill, get your right mic on there. Bill has that crappy mic on these cameras. They're nice cameras, but the mics are horrible. I don't
I'm on
understand
my
how in the world.
AirPods. I hope that's right. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. It picked the right one tonight. How's that?
Yeah, but why do they make these really nice cameras and the audio is so bad? It sounds like you're in a urinal in an airport in Walla Walla. When I've done it too. I've accidentally had this mic, off this camera. It is really hot. So, anyway,
I don't have to do anything tonight. I get to just sit here. It's going to be great.
What do you mean?
I'm not in charge of the guests.
Okay. Well, good. I'll sit here too. I notice everybody bailed out because nobody wants to be in the political show here. I've tried to. I talked about it.
I want to talk about model trains because the guy's got a model train layout.
Yeah. No. We talked about it in the pre-show. This will not be about politics. It is not about politics. The show tonight.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Not.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing okay. I just sent Eric the invite, and I really appreciate, the note, James, on making sure we stay on topic here. And I think if you have that disclaimer, that'll help. Eric does know what program he's coming on, so I hope that helps.
So I throw out all my questions about gerrymandering and everything else, right?
Yeah, he has very clear views on a number of.
I only have one thing I want to talk about tonight. That's model railroads.
Yeah.
I'm warming up the buzzer.
That buzzer's getting a workout tonight.
No. It's like I say, Neil, we're all on the same page here. It will be fine. We will not be getting into that. That's good. And see, when the haters come, they come after me. They don't come after Kim. They come straight for me. And
that's the advantage of me not being on Twitter, really. Like I'm kind of there as an interloper.
You just dabble in social media. You don't have your entire foot dipped into it like some of us. And Neil is the smartest guy on the show. He doesn't deal with it at all. I mean, he's the smartest guy. So.
Can we just pause really a second? Can we comment on the fact that there's a moving tornado behind Eric? Eric, I didn't realize your setup moved.
I see what you meant by your tweet now, Eric. It's an anticyclonic tornado.
It is.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
I ordered.
What is that thing?
So, welcome to my model train basement. So, this is the town. The tornado's officially not touched the ground yet. And that's the smaller town, and then over there's the larger city, and then there's a mountain right over on the other side.
Are you going to run the train for us? I'm here for the trains. So
it actually, I am not kidding you. It derailed in the tunnel, and my back. I'm getting old, so I got to go up underneath the train board, and it's not good. But it's an anticyclonic tornado because I didn't realize that. Of course, when I mounted it, I'd have to mount it upside down.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Yeah. There you go.
I thought it was an Al Gore tornado. Oh, there's the buzzer again.
And don't make me.
Already, Bill?
Boy.
Already?
Well, I had to make that reference to the WeatherBrains show from 2005.
Not even on the damn area.
BillMurray.com. Bill at BillMurray.com.
I just had to say.
So let's
political
get this thing
commentary intended.
Started. All right, let me get the and Neil says he has audio issues. How is it the smartest guy on the show always has the audio issues? I don't understand that. Neil,
I never have audio issues.
So here he comes, and he's connecting to audio, and hopefully he will be good, and we can get this thing started. To our television viewers, welcome. We're about to start this thing right now. Neil, can you hear us okay now?
I could hear you fine. I just couldn't hear myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, loud and clear. You're good. All right, we're good. All right, let's start the thing. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a Noaa Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service, and the AEMS Weather Band.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
This is WeatherBrains, episode number 851, the weekly show that's all about weather, the longest running weather podcast in the universe. We started this show in 2006. Who'd have thunk it? We're still here, but we're glad that you're here with us. And going to be a fun show tonight. Troy Kimmel, I see you've joined us from Texas, deep in the heart of Texas.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sweating out there yet?
Not bad. We've been in the upper 90s the last couple of days, but we're waiting for 137 once we get to about July the 2nd. So, we're working our way that direction.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The long hot summer is getting close.
Yeah.
But we have had a refreshing, cool
you have
breeze here. It has just been, and the old people call it blackberry winter here. And I don't even get into blackberry winter because you ask 10 older people what blackberry winter means. They give you 10 different answers and then they all start fighting. So I don't even get into it. But
you know what that means, though. I mean, it means in about 3 weeks you'll be roasting your what off. So
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it means. We're about to go into the heat. So, but anyway, we're enjoying this last gasp of refreshing air. Dr. Neil Jacobs, are you in Florida or Carolina? Where are you at tonight?
I'm in DC right now. I wish I was in Florida because they're about to get some really solid northeast swell here over the next few days, and I am stranded in the swamp.
Showtime.
But it's yeah. I'm up here doing my real job, which is working on the models.
You are the NWP czar, and
right.
We appreciate what you do. All of us little low-level practitioners down here appreciate, sir, what you do. Don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. We are thankful and appreciative for what you do. Goodness gracious. Let's see. Bill Murray, you've been on that Peloton bike today?
No, not enough. I need to get on it some more, James. That's tomorrow's resolution for tomorrow.
So, what's going on in your world here, Bill? Everything okay? How's life? You're not on the train tonight? You're not
been
traveling?
Great. Yeah, I need a train ride, James. It's been way too long. I was glad to see that our guest WeatherBrain tonight love trains. He actually has something. Eric, you like to turn around and show us your Rockford, Illinois Amtrak station sign. Because
I've got that right over there. Yeah,
I covet that thing. That looks pretty cool. Since I love trains and Amtrak and stuff too. And it looks like they're going to try to bring the old Land of Corn back, the Black Hawk.
Yes.
The Amtrak from Dubuque to Chicago. So is it going to be Metro or is it going to be Amtrak?
I think it'll probably be Amtrak for most of this area, which is good. A lot of people are saying, the people, the younger generation, they don't want to have a car, so they want to be able to have that link to the bigger city. So makes sense to me.
And that's my contribution to Train Brains for tonight, James. So there.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome to Train Brains. We're glad you're here. So, and before Kim officially introduces Eric, let me just say that Eric is running for office. And whenever you introduce anybody involved in politics, it tends to create three things: hate, anger, and rage. And before you change the channel, and I know this is not television, but before you dump our show and go to the next weather podcast, we're not talking politics tonight. We're talking weather and the concept of what it's like to move on from meteorology into something else. And I think for everybody on this show, we've thought about that. I mean, the pressure, the things we deal with is their life after being a professional meteorologist. And in this case, Eric happens to be in politics. And there are a lot of people that listen to the show that agree with everything he says, and they want him to win. There's a lot of people that disagree with everything he says, and they want him to lose. And there's a lot of no-wingers like me that are critical thinkers. And I think there's more of people like me in the world than some imagine. I don't think we become a nation of these lemmings that just follow political leaders blindly. I think there's a lot of us out there, but again, we're not going to get into any hot button issues. We're not going to get into anything like that. This is going to be about weather, okay, and the transformation to something else. So, and I do have my finger on the buzzer here real quick. So Kim, having said that, the floor belongs to you. So go.
Well, thanks for that. It's appropriate to me that you have the hot button, given that here in Norman, Oklahoma, it is extremely hot. We really enjoyed having our 2 days. We had about 2 days of real actual spring, and they were glorious and beautiful. And now it's a blast furnace. And I mean that seriously. The wind hasn't stopped. It's very humid, very hot, very windy, and you go outside and it really does feel like you're in a convection oven. But
you know why it's so hot, don't you? Sorry, I'm unhinged.
Boy, he's quick
totally
with the buttons
unhinged.
tonight, isn't he?
Unhinged. I'm sorry.
Yes, he is. He is.
The chemtrail people are just mean. They are mean. I mean, they run in packs and they come after you, and they're just not nice. So but I can handle it. But I'm sorry, Kim. Let's introduce our special guest before he hangs up on us.
That's all right. I have a feeling he has a vested interest in being on here, given that for those who can't see our program, if you're just listening, our guest tonight has this live set behind him, the train depot that Bill was referring to, but it also features this incredible wall cloud and a spinning tornado out of it, hitting the city of Rockford, I guess, Rockford, Illinois,
wow.
which is just something else. And for people who can see this, and if you're listening, you might want to flip to YouTube just so you can see what I'm talking about. It's extraordinary. And I'm going to do my best to stay on task and on target, even though there's this extraordinary, I feel like I'm in a psychology experiment. There's this distractor item like right behind you. And I have to process other information. So good. So Eric Sorensen, it is so good to have you on the show. And, yes, you're running for political office, and we can talk about topics in our space. We talk about policy issues and weather all the time. So that kind of stuff, that is stuff we don't shy away from, but we're going to keep you in sort of, that lane. But all that to say, I think it's really exciting to have someone who comes from meteorology, of a background in broadcast meteorology that we're going to talk about, and that you decided to make this pivot that Ben was talking about into something else. And your story and your background, I think people will find really compelling, and your motivations for trying to get into public service this way are wonderful. So welcome to the show. We're delighted to have you.
Oh, thank you all very much for the invitation to be here tonight and to really talk about that transition. And I really believe that there is less politics that we need to talk about and more about our shared values. And so I'm happy to do that. And one of the things that, real quick, for me, I realized that we as meteorologists and communicators, we are trusted for telling the truth. And it's not that we get the weather right every time. It's that we tell the truth. And to be on this podcast with you, James, is quite an honor, because you are one of the leaders to be able to, I learned from you, hey, listen, you got to get into these smaller towns to understand where the tight S curve is, where the Walmart is. And I realized that I spent 20 years of my career in broadcast meteorology in this one district. And it never even crossed my mind to run for US Congress until one morning last year when my congresswoman announced that she was retiring. And I think the pandemic really had something to do with me making this decision. But I realized it's not so much politics for me as it is the people they need, somebody that they can trust who's going to convey science, especially during the pandemic, especially with climate change. And so after a lot of talk with other of our colleagues in meteorology, I heard back from a lot of folks who said, Eric, if I'm trusted in my area too, in my locale, if you're able to do this, maybe I'll think about running for Congress where I live. And one of my good friends even said, Eric, we're probably going to, if I thought about doing this and I were to run for Congress, we'd probably be on different sides of the aisle. But man, wouldn't that be great if we could work together in science? And I'm like, That's what I want more than anything. It's not about me. It's about where we're going to go. And this is just a step forward.
That's
Eric,
wonderful.
I've
Sorry,
Troy
go ahead,
here.
Troy.
No, it's good to talk to you, man. And pleasure to have you on the show. Do me a favor and kind of tell us a little about your history in broadcast and how you got started out in that and leading up to today.
Yeah, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois. I was one of those that was deathly afraid of storms, and for me, it was the connection to the meteorologist who was on TV. In Rockford, Illinois, in the 1970s and 80s, it was Eric Nefstedt. He was the meteorologist on WREX, and I shared the same first name. So it was like he was talking to me. And what was great was it wasn't until probably about 20 years later that I got to tell him that, hey, listen, you planted the seed in me to want to learn more about meteorology and crave that science. And so I went to Northern Illinois University, got my Bachelor of Science degree, became a meteorologist, moved down to East Texas, worked at KTRE in Lufkin, KLTV in Tyler, and spent about 5 years there understanding, tornadoes. I was in one hurricane. It was Hurricane Lily. Never again. In about 2 minutes of being in the whole I look like a banana. I was in a rain slicker, and I realized in about 2 minutes of standing out there, it's hot rain. They don't tell you that, obviously it's warm rain, but then I realized every article of my clothing was wet, and so I felt the need to move back home, and there was a job opening at WREX in Rockford, Illinois.
Wow!
And I got to be the Eric. WREX for 11 years. And after 11 years, I moved to the next market over where I am today in Moline, Illinois. I just finished an 8-year stint at WQAD. And that leads me here to today.
And how long had you been in broadcast? When was your first broadcast job?
22 years. I started in 99. Okay.
Business has changed a little bit. The broadcast business has changed a tad, huh, Eric?
It has. One of the things I think is great, and maybe it's for those of us that have been in the business a long time, it's how the perception of our forecasts, how they're received, how we communicate them to be remembered. I look back at the beginning at the old VHS tapes of when I started, and it was literally point to the cold front. Here's high pressure. There's a 40% chance of rain, and I'm done. But now I believe that, we have the ability as broadcast meteorologists, not only to be the person that's going to plant the seed in the next generation, but really explain the why, so that we don't have to compete against our phones if we explain the why the weather is happening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Troy, for asking about that background in broadcast. And I love that you've been in so many different places. I think, it's really important as a meteorologist to get that experience, but also too, if you want to run for Congress, I think it's really good for you to see multiple places and, the kinds of lived experiences people have. I think as meteorologists, this is something that goes underappreciated as we do move across the country for our jobs. This is common in the weather service. It's common in broadcast. We encounter a lot of different kinds of communities, and you can see the way that science intersects with people in a variety of contexts. So very, very interesting to hear about that background and your experiences. Do you have a thought on that?
No, I would agree with that. One of the things for me running for Congress is, while I will be the representative of the people, it's not everything about me. I'm going to be the one representative for the group of people that live here. And I think that's the important thing that we need to instill in our next generation of leaders, not to do this for themselves. For me, I'm fine living in this house for the rest of my life. I've been in small market television my entire life, but we've got to do things for the right reasons. And I believe that we need more science communication and science guided people in our Congress.
Definitely. So I was really heartened to hear you talking with other colleagues who probably have similar backgrounds, who'd say from a variety of different places on the aisle, across these aisles of politics, that there are scientists that could engage in this space. So very, very much agree. What do you think it is that's special in particular about scientists coming into Congress, by the way?
Well, for me, going back, it was kind of Jim Gandy was first at WLTX, and it was in about 2010 that I started communicating climate and weaving that into the weathercasts when I was in Rockford. What was interesting was I immediately heard back from the people that I expected, right? The progressives, but I didn't expect that the farmers, the conservatives in my viewing audience were going to reach out to me and say, Eric, thanks for talking about this without the politics, without the opinion, because we trust you. And the thing that I never realized was we build up the trust in our community by telling the truth. So there is that connection. And for, about, 10, 12 years here, the people have gotten that communication of science and climate, and they haven't needed to question it because it hasn't been polarized. And so looking back on it, we as meteorologists, we have the ability to talk over the partisan divide. And I really hope and I believe that we as meteorologists, we can take the partisan divide out of climate. For me, it was explaining what the problems are with climate. And now here, in this district, we have polling that shows that climate is a top issue for the voters in the district. And when they are asked who they trust, they pick the meteorologist, 59% to the elected leader at 11%. So we have the ability to make
yeah.
Wow.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Little bit.
So you brought up bringing climate into your broadcast. Let's talk about your experience at WREX in Rockford for a little bit here, because there were a couple of programs you were involved in that I think people would be interested in. You mentioned bringing climate science into your broadcasts. Can you talk a little bit about how you did that, and at what point did you intersect with this program known as Climate Matters? It's something that is a national program to try to help broadcasters sort of empower you with local relevant content about climate for broadcast audiences. But you've been doing this for a long time, actually.
Yeah, and in my undergraduate studies in meteorology, a lot of the climatology was on record keeping. It wasn't on the change in climate. So I had to undergo as much intensive research as I could, getting my hands on every abstract that I could find to try to understand this. And so all I was doing was, we had a couple of big tornado events in January. To be able to connect these big events that are happening out of the season, and to look and say, all right, the wildfires out west, these are happening more frequently. One thing that I did at WREX, and I think was essential, was we made the decision at the TV station to take the climate change stories and not have the news anchors read them ever. And so what we did was the producers would come to the meteorologists and say, all right, I've got this story. Okay, I'm going to look into this story. We'll run it tomorrow if it all looks up, if it looks good, if it checks out. And so that was the important step forward for me, because it was my word, it was my name that was now on this information. And we started that in WREX. And, I think looking back on it, I think we all have an obligation to communicate the science. And we need to take the politics out. It shouldn't be a political issue. And the only way for us to not have this be a political issue is for us to talk about it. And I think the best way that I found was to localize what's happening. It's no longer the polar bears, right? It's the fact that it costs more at the grocery store because the climate challenges. It's understanding the inequities of climate. The wealthiest among us are the biggest cause of it, but the poor, disadvantaged, and the people of color are being given the biggest burden today. And those are some of the messages that I think resonate to people because I think we all inherently want to do some good.
Absolutely. Bringing things down to the local level too helps people to, I think, to understand what they're seeing. And it's something when it's your lived experience. And we hear this too in the social sciences, what you were talking about with your audience across the political spectrum. People would, talk to you about, we'll give you feedback on your stories and say, yeah, this all resonates with me. I've seen this. We've seen the same thing in our research where when people looking at their local areas, especially people who are close to the land, agriculturalists, they know how things have functioned for perhaps generations on that land. And they've adapted a very sophisticated set of practices. If you haven't ever delved into agriculture, agribusiness, and studied how they do what they do, it's sophisticated. And they are a very savvy set of scientists, really, in their operations.
Yeah.
And so when things are changing, this is a really big deal for them. And they're among the most knowledgeable people in how their environments are changing, especially around things like, extreme events and changes in moisture, when they're going to get rain, how much rain they get. And I hear from farmers, and this might be something that when you told your story, something that you heard too, people were really keying in on that piece. The temperature part maybe didn't resonate as much because it's harder to really tell, if you're having a hotter year than normal, like these, it's kind of a little bit challenging for people to really feel that, but moisture is something you can see, and you can see it in the ecosystem more easily too. And so one of the things we found was, people would see, hey, I can't actually be doing my planting when I usually was, because the soil is so dry after these long hot summers in the Great Plains. This is definitely a concern. The timing is very important to get stuff planted for the winter to come back around. And so, yeah, I think that might be something that connects really well, science and practice. And just how did that tend to go? What kinds of stories did you see resonating with people?
I hear that a lot. One question a good story that I had, I was out in a town called Kewanee, Illinois. And this was back when we were getting petitions signed, because you need to get X number of petitions to actually get on the ballot. And so I was standing on the sidewalk downtown Kewanee, and a gentleman and his wife walked up. And I said, "Hi, I'm Eric Sorensen. I was your meteorologist on Channel 8, and I'm running for Congress." "Oh, we remember you." And I said, "Well, would you sign my petition to help me get on the ballot?" "Oh, yeah." The guy goes to reach for my clipboard, and he goes, "Eric, I don't know if I can." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, you're running in the Democratic Party. I'm more of a Republican." And he wasn't expecting me to say what I said next. I said, "You know what? That's all right." I said, "What do you do for a living?" Turns out he's a third-generation farmer up near Prophetstown, Illinois. And I said, "Man," I said, you've got to see how the climate's changing, because you're on the front lines of this. How we get a 4-inch rain, high precipitation storm, 4 inches of rain in an hour, and then it doesn't rain for 20 days. That's affecting your livelihood." And he said, "Well, yeah." He goes, it's hard to deny that things are changing, but Eric, I just don't know what we're supposed to do about it." And I said, "That should be my job. My job will be to go to Washington to find out what we need to do about it, to make sure that we have a scientist that's making the decisions there. But I said, I want to come back to you on your farm and talk with you about the solutions." And then he leaned in and he goes, "Well, now you sound like a Democrat who's trying to make sense." I said, "Well, I don't know, man." And he grabbed my clipboard and he signed my petition. But you know what? I thought that was going to be the best thing. But then I looked up at his wife, and his wife gave me that smile, that smirk that said, "Congratulations, you just busted through the outer shell of my husband." And I'm like, that's the reason why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this because I'm under the umbrella of a political party. I'm going to work for the Republicans in this district too. It doesn't really matter. What matters here is that we follow the science. And to be honest with you, we haven't had a meteorologist in Congress in nearly 50 years. Dale Milford from WFAA in 1976 was the last one. I'm like, gosh, we need not just the person to go to Washington with the background of the science, but it's got to be the background of the science communication. That's what we've been missing all along.
Eric, what I find interesting, you made a breakthrough there apparently, but I find it even more amazing the breakthrough that you made in the TV station, because I'm amazed that you have a producer coming and say, "Okay, we have this story. What do you think about it?" Because I know in the past, you just have a producer come in and say, "This is a story we're going to use," and I love getting I can go back and tell you when I was in television, we would get, this is back in the earlier days, but you'd get a picture in the newsroom, image, and they'd say, we're going to use this. What a great tornado. I said, well, that's great, except it's photoshopped, and I probably wouldn't end up using it on the air. But was that kind of tricky in television to get the producers where they'd be willing to come and give you 12 hours or maybe 24 hours to look over a story and talk about whether it's legit or not and how we're going to end up doing this?
Yeah, I spent the last 8 years here in the Quad Cities doing mornings. So it was a little bit different doing mornings because, I would get something in my inbox that one of the producers would find and say, if it was a Monday morning, they'd be like, hey, proof this for Tuesday morning. And we would just hold it. And then they would go into the newsroom interface and then put a hold on that video for the next morning. But I really think that's what we as the scientists, as the people who understand this, what we need to be doing. We shouldn't just be giving the news anchors the reads on stories about climate. Or way back when I was in the weather center sitting there and going like this when I heard what the news anchors were reading, and I'm like, that's not true. That's not right. Well, we've got to fix that.
But I find it amazing that you're basically the way it should be is you're kind of QCing, you're quality controlling some of this stuff that is more science-based, and that's the way it should be.
And we need to do more of that too. And I love like Climate Central for meteorologists that are using Climate Central, because again, these are locally, the data goes right down to your specific market. And I think that is critical to connecting people, with what's going on. Because, when it comes down to it, it's like, we're just the communicators. I want the people who are watching to come up with the conclusion. Because the one thing that if I can take this back to COVID for a minute, I don't fault the people that aren't making the right decisions. Okay. Because as scientists, we take data. Okay. And we parse out the bad data because we know if we kept that bad data in, we're going to get a bad conclusion. It's going to have error in it. So what we need to do is parse out the bad data so our conclusion is good. Well, the thing about meteorology is it doesn't stop there. We then communicate the conclusion of our equation, right? But I think in with respect to what's going on in the pandemic, we have so many people that are being given bad data. And they're making a bad decision, based on a bad conclusion. So what is the solution to that? I don't see misinformation going away with the rise of social media, with the rise of partisan politics, talking on television. But what I do feel the need is for our elected, my ring light is keeps falling. I love that this is live. It's like I'm on live TV again. But I think for us, what we need is to make sure that we elect the leaders that we already trust. And when we do that, then it will cut through the misinformation.
I gotta think we're talking about Mr. Sorensen's going to Washington here. I mean, in a way, and Eric, I mean, there's such a degree of mistrust at that level. Yeah. So I commend you for wanting to do the right thing.
And one of the things that from the beginning, I was so lucky to be able to have the right people to look at and to talk to the right people to make sure that I could put together the team. And a lot of people think, oh, it's the political party that's driving a campaign. It is absolutely not. It is making a phone call, telling people about what it means, what the campaign is about. A lot of people I didn't understand, why does the campaign need money? Why can't I just go get on the ballot and then just knock door to door? Well, guess what? You need consultants. You need to do polling. You need to figure out what your message is going to be. You need to figure out where you're known and where you're not. Then you have to make sure that you get an ad. And then you've got to buy the TV time. And so it's making sure that, we're building that fundraising from the ground up and not taking the money from the dark side. There's no, oil and gas money coming into my campaign. It's just all the smaller dollar building up from the ground up. And I will give you guys, I buried the lead. But this isn't just that I'm running for Congress in Illinois 17. We're winning. Every poll that's come out has shown that we're in the lead. So there is, I would say, a better than 50-50 chance that there will be a meteorologist touchdown in Washington next year.
Is that Eric a point probability or never mind?
Yeah, what's the reference class of that probability? We need to be really specific. Did you have a question, Bill?
I wanted to ask Troy about the fellow who was in the House of Representatives in the 70s. Troy, did you know him? He came from Waco. Eric referred to him. Dale Milford, I think is his name.
Yeah, and I recall the name, Eric, but I'm so young that I just probably don't. Watch it, Kim.
I
but
found
I do
it
recognize
interesting that
the
he
name,
was an
Eric.
Air Force meteorologist,
Yeah.
and that he
Right.
went to Waco starting in 1953, which is, of course, the year of the big tornado. I wonder if that was in any way related. He went to Baylor, and then ran a variety of businesses before running for Congress, and he was reelected twice. He lost his reelection bid in 1978. So the last time we had a meteorologist before you come along, Eric, and in Congress would have been January 1979. That's interesting. Neil, I would have thought we would have had someone from our profession at some point along the way. Why do you think that is, that we're underrepresented?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think a lot of scientists, the probably one of the biggest limiting factors I've seen is science communication. And I feel like a lot of times communication skill is indirectly proportional to scientific capability, unfortunately. And there's not a lot of people who are really good at both. Yeah. And a lot of scientists tend to be introverts. They don't want to get mixed up in what's going on in DC. And if you watch what goes on in DC from outside DC, it looks like a partisan nightmare, when the reality is most of the Hill staff that I know and work with work back and forth across the aisle day in and day out. But that's not interesting news, so if all you see is interesting news from the outside, it's not, it really looks as appealing as it actually is.
Yeah, the benign reality. If people knew how things really were, I mean, they both feel, I think, more comforted, but also, yeah, maybe not as ravenously engaged, which maybe would be okay. But Neil, I'm wondering if you can comment too. I mean, it's been this long since we've had a meteorologist in Congress, but it was, even when you look at Noaa as an agency that houses so many meteorologists, it's not common to have a meteorologist heading that agency. How long had it been before, since you had taken over that role?
I want to say maybe Bob White, the first.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to realize Noaa hasn't really been around that long. That was like 1970s. I mean, the Weather Bureau, the Weather Service and the Weather Bureau had been around for 150 years. But then it was with some oceanographers, astronaut, marine biologist, geologist. It's not very common. But the weather is not, the Weather Act, look how much bipartisan support that had. And the NIDIS reauthorization, there was a ton of support. Those were always like the fun hearings to go to, because they weren't contentious at all, because everyone, no matter what district you're in, has got weather or climate issues. And so that was, there's a lot of things that could, be hot potatoes in DC. That's usually not one of them. But I do have a question. So one of the things that I've noticed in general is it's pretty, I don't know whether I'd say it's easy, but a lot of the practice is sort of standard practice is getting money for your constituents after an event in the wake of some big disaster. And that's something that you can sort of claim, to run on and, I worked really hard to get, all this disaster aid relief. But how do you run and convince people that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure? Because from a purely investment perspective, it's pennies on the dollar to prevent some of these things, but it's really hard to claim a success on something that didn't happen versus claiming, you got money to repair the damage on the back end. So how do you turn that into a winning argument?
I think one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to focus on the communication of it. And we as meteorologists are really great at that. We're really great at getting people prepared for the worst case scenario. And I think that should be how we do this. And it's not just what's going to happen as our climate warms. We've got to think about that, with respect to the pandemic. We were not prepared for it. And we've got to make sure that we're prepared for it in the next phase. And people will only react to what they see, the perceived risk that they see, which is why broadcast meteorologists find that people will take our communication to heart when they see that, when we can show them that tornado, that funnel cloud coming down, then people will react. And we know that through the social science. And so now it's how do we move that forward in Washington? And I think one of the things is making sure that we advocate for the success of the National Weather Service. I will be a champion for that, certainly, going forward. In fact, I'm the only person that's ever been endorsed by the National Weather Service Employees Union that's been outside of their organization, because they know how important that is to have an advocate in Washington.
I'm interested in going back a little bit. One of the things that you have lingered on, and I think is really pertinent to Neil's question about, how do you, as a meteorologist, kind of get that audience attention and move forward with a campaign when, our business is about trying to stave off disaster. So if a disaster doesn't occur, that's actually wonderful. But I think a lot of the work that you've done in seeding programs, resilience-oriented programs into the communities that you're working with, it's all about achieving those goals. So you're gaining trust and buy-in probably in another way. You're not having to only just sell the value proposition of, look how much I saved you in your damage losses. There's something about especially severe weather that I think touches people. And we know that there's a high risk perception. People are concerned. You've experienced this even in Northern Illinois. Mm-hmm. You've done some work, education outreach programs. And I know that you were really involved in this with WREX. Can you talk a little bit about some of that piece and maybe how that has linked to the trust and support that you've built and how you can show that value of the science without having to get into this nitty gritty of, this is how much we've saved of disaster. You're gaining trust in another way.
Yeah, I took a great idea from Mark Skirto, who's the chief meteorologist at KLTV in Tyler, when I was working under him, and bringing that to Northern Illinois. I kind of took a program called Project Tornado and I just put it on steroids. Basically what we did in my team, instead of going to individual classrooms for class visits, we decided to make it into an entire month of tornado preparedness. Where we started work on this in January, right after the holidays. We started putting together the year's 5 to 10 minute documentary that would be played in the assembly. We're not talking about one classroom, it's an entire school, putting everybody under one roof to be able to play a documentary video. Everyone got a full color book. And the TV station, we broke even because we sold an advertising on the back cover. And so, I would take the camera, and I would, show the video of the kids, and then put it on the news that night. And usually I took the one or two greatest questions that we took at the end, and I'd say, Billy, that's a great question, except I can't answer that, but I will answer it on 13 News at 5. And here's the reason why. While these kids are not consumers of our news product, they will be someday. They're going to remember the connection they had with the meteorologist. And our hope, and we know it happened, was they were going to take that booklet home and say, look, the meteorologist came to my school today. And we know that the aunt or the uncle or the mom or the dad would look at that book and start flipping through it and reading it. And so it wasn't so much that we were talking to just the kids. We knew that they were connected to the adults, and we were connecting them as well. And it was amazing. We talked to between 5,000 and 6,000 students every month of May. And it wasn't just me. It was all of the meteorologists on the team that would go out individually. And it was so successful. I wish more meteorologists, and anybody who wants more information, I would be glad to give you any information about Project Tornado that you would ever need to get this done in your market. It was so great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful program. And this is a random aside. Eric probably knew that I was going to bring this next thing up, at least as a quick detour. Whether or not he was running for Congress, I would have brought this personal note up. I knew about Eric through Project Tornado before I ever met Eric, because it just so happened that one of my good friends from home had been a producer, reporter, and anchor at WREX. And when she found out that she was working with this guy who had this great tornado program, I had to know about it. And every year I got this pamphlet. I got not just one, I got a whole stack of these pamphlets she's sending to Oklahoma, where I was a grad student, but it was amazing, right? And it turned out to be a wonderful thing that she built that connection. She had us connect, we had a phone conversation. We shared all these values, and Eric was talking about his real interest in the social science. I got to share on some of the research that we were doing in the mid-aughts and, done toward 2010. And it was really a blessing that Jeannie had made that connection, because unfortunately she got very ill very quickly. And about 10 years ago, she was covering the election in 2012, was about to go into work to cover it. And I was one of the only people outside of her family that was able to get up to Chicago before she passed, because Eric gave me a phone call. And he said, if you want to see her, you've got to get here now. And I want people to know how good this person is. He was at the hospital with Jeannie's family and with me for so much of that very difficult time, helping us in a place we weren't from, and helping us to make sure that we had everything we needed and the care we needed. And I'll be providing my pick of the week is actually going to be him and the WREX crew eulogizing Jeannie. But I did want to bring up that work. I have saved that, Eric, all these years. I have a huge stack of Project Tornado pamphlets that I will never ever give away. And I think it's just delightful that we had that connection.
Yeah, she was the one that brought us together in friendship and in our weather, because she knew how passionate you were about the weather and to live with it. But I tell you what, to have a 28-year-old colleague not know that she had leukemia, I to this day, I will just get a feather or something outside that will just float down in front of me, and I'll be like, thanks, Jeannie. Because she was just it's funny because, God, I was probably in my late 30s. You don't realize that the people that are around us have such a profound impact on where we're going to be. And if that made me just a little bit better of a person, you're bringing back the
sorry.
You got precipitation. You got precipitation.
Sorry. I do just think it's important. One of the things that is so nice about knowing some of your background, and I want people to know this. It's the things we see, even for people who are running, are such a small part of a whole person. And I think it's really great for people to know what a lovely whole person you are, and that I hope that her little spirit is guiding you through all of this. I have to believe that it is, as I've felt she's behind me too. So sorry for that deviation, but I couldn't talk about Project Tornado without bringing up Jeannie, because I have your anthology. If you want these materials, they are really top-notch, high-class education outreach materials. And I think, Eric, when you were doing that work in the community, and this is something James can speak to too, when you're caring about children, when you're caring about families, all of this was about helping people to prepare and connecting people to resources and getting down in that space. Do you think that is an important foundation for trust that maybe meteorologists underutilize? When we're in there and people know we care, people don't care what you think until they know that you care, is a truism that maybe is a cliche, but it is just absolutely a fact. And knowing, what you're doing, you're sowing care into the community. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on that a little bit.
One of the things that looking back in a career, it's having the connections with people, and a lot of times, since I'm not on television anymore, I can tell you that the most cruel part about being a television meteorologist is the fact that we're just talking to an inanimate object. There's no one there. Okay. And so we all perform as well as we can on television, because that's what people expect of us. Even though it may be really hard, we may be having a really cloudy or stormy day. And so I think the most wonderful thing is to be able to get out in the community and hear from people that have had that connection with the television meteorologist. To say, Eric, that storm, it took off our roof. We went in the basement. One time we had a downburst about 2 miles away from the TV station. And right after it happened, it was a fluke. And I drove down there and I walked there and they're like, Sorensen, how did you get here so quick? and actually I was standing with them out in front of their house where their roof had been taken into the field next door. And I said, did you guys used to have wood chips around your trees out front? And they looked around and they're like, where are the wood chips? I said, well, this was a downburst because there's no wood chips left anymore. So the air went down out of the storm, went out and lifted up your roof. And that's why it all went in one direction. And it was like, whoa. It was having that connection and then running into them at the grocery store a year later. Yeah. That's the connection that I think that drives us, that makes us want to not only do our jobs, but be better at it.
Absolutely. Troy, you had wanted, speaking of our jobs, we've all been thinking about some of the ways that our field functions. And I think you had some questions for Eric about that.
Well, I think, as long as Eric has been doing what he's been doing on television, and it's not exactly, Eric, always a quiet weather market, up there. In reference to our past couple of editions here on WeatherBrains, we've been talking a lot about the warning process and particularly how we deal with the public, also how's the National Weather Service perform and all that. Eric, in 2021, 2022 is currently, are we doing a pretty good job? And this is something, again, we've addressed, tornado emergencies, the weather service side of it, but also the TV side. Are we doing a good job in 2022 in communicating that information to the public?
Well, I just look at these big events like Mayfield or very recently in Andover. Yeah. These are success stories for the communication of the science of what's going on. But I certainly feel, that means we've gone so much farther than I think that I ever thought we would get. But that means that what is that next discovery? What is that next place that we as meteorologists need to be in the communication of the science of severe weather? And one of the things that I get nervous about, it seems like people are relatively flippant about tornado watches and tornado warnings. Oh, it won't happen here. And I think that there's going to be a really big challenge for us going forward, how we get this message out to people, whether that's on their device or on their TV. But certainly going forward, it's how are we going to continue to be better at what we're already good at?
Well, I gotta tell you just a couple of seconds ago, I don't know if y'all noticed it or not, but Eric actually had the tornado in his hands. He had his hands like this. The tornado was actually in his hands. Eric, you got me. Okay.
Eric, a few weeks ago, we had a situation where some false reports led to an erroneous tornado emergency in Arkansas, and you weighed in on that on your Twitter account. Talk about what you think that situation involved and what should be done about it, and how can we do anything in public policy that relates to that?
Yeah, I was almost duped once by a tornado warn storm where I had a high schooler who was up until that point very reliable with respect to severe weather. I got a tornado picture. And it made me second guess putting it on the air, to the point where, we were doing tag team coverage, and I did a Google image reverse search, and I found that it was not valid. It was not current to that storm. And so I look that we've got to find a solution to that. While it's something that's rare, I really think that there's a lot of us here in the communication of severe weather that want to have this ability. I think there's going to be a next generation of whatever NWS chat needs to be, where people will have to give credentials in order to be a part of this important communication. I've been FEMA trained to be able to understand not only what the meteorology is, but what the next steps are once there is a disaster. And I really think that there needs to be more focused credentialing of the people that give that information.
All right, so I got some questions here, Eric. You ready?
Oh yeah.
Ready?
Oh yeah.
So do you miss it? A lot of us, like, I've been doing this 44 years. I mean, I'm old as dirt. For 44 years, I've been coming into these TV stations, doing the weather and doing my thing. And I just wonder what it's like on the other side. You've stopped. And do you miss the TV thing at all?
Well, I miss the communication of it, certainly. Do I miss getting up at 2 a.m? Bleep, no. But here's the great thing about this. From other meteorologists who have moved on, weather is still a great thing. Like, to be able to go and sit in my garage and watch a storm, or to be able to look at it on radar scope and say, all right, we're going to get a good one here in a little while. I mean, that's great things, because we all, when we talk about weather, it's the one thing that we all share. And so at least I still have that. I will. So
do you still do weather on social media? Do you still kind of push weather information even now?
Not really, because I really think, and I believe that should be for the people that are focused on forecasting every day. I mean, it's no secret to most people that our forecasts are more reliable. If we're working Monday through Friday, our Friday forecast is going to be more reliable, because we're getting the reps in for 5 days. And so I don't want to jump into something that I'm not putting as much care into. But certainly, if there's a tornado warning, I'll let people know, and that still comes from in here. So
you go to Washington. You obviously understand the National Weather Service and Noaa. What's the future? Where do you see the National Weather Service in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years? What needs to happen there?
Well, if this was a nationwide race that I was running, James, all I'd have to say is we need a Doppler radar in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And Meridian, Mississippi. Don't forget that. I got a hole down here too that nobody talks about. But yeah,
All right. Wait. I'm gonna put this on the.
yeah.
I think that was the
Meridian,
show title
Mississippi.
right there.
Yeah.
I know Brad Panovich just went like this. Yes.
Yeah.
But I really believe that we need to make sure that there is adequate funding for not only the National Weather Service offices. We need to make sure that our forecast offices are never in jeopardy, first and foremost. Second of all, we need to make sure that we are investing in our modeling, because we know that our modeling, I mean, look at the difference just in the past 5 years, right? And as we make an investment in our weather models, we're going to get more accurate forecasts. And you know what? That's going to absolutely 100% affect the consumer, which are the people that live in our communities. So that's kind of first and foremost. And then to be honest with you, I've told a lot of people this. We all know that there's no silver bullet to climate change. I believe that there's 10,000, maybe 100,000 different decisions that need to be made. And it's not guaranteed that one is going to domino effect on another. And so what we need today is we need someone that's going to go there and be able to make one decision after another, or at least just communicate it. Because what I see here in Northwestern Illinois is a district that looks a lot like districts across the country. And what we need to make sure that we're doing most is at least we're communicating the science effectively about what's happening in these hometowns.
All right, Neil, you now that we're back on the DC thing and the Weather Service and Noaa, you step right back in here. The swamp.
Boy, I wouldn't even know where to start. I would say, actually, you know what? Let me quick, before I forget, put in a plug for the AMS policy program. This is a fantastic program that I think doesn't get nearly enough press or probably credit for a lot of the really good stuff they do. Basically what it is anyone, AMS members, the sign up is usually in the spring, and then it's happening right now. So there's a class right now. You get to come to DC, spend a week here. You visit with Hill staff, you visit with representatives, you visit with senators, OMB, White House staff, and you really get to see at the ground level everything that goes on in DC. And for everyone out there who sort of looks at DC as this black box where seemingly incoherent decisions come from, going through the policy program really adds like a whole new level of clarity to the process. And I think it's awesome. So if you haven't gone through it, I would highly recommend joining AMS, doing the policy program. I'm going to be there this year helping out with it, telling everyone my secret sausage recipes. So you really get to see how things are done in DC, and it's refreshing. You will leave with a newfound confidence in how the system works. I can tell you that. Anyway, shameless plug for AMS policy program. I guess maybe a question for you, Eric. What is your level of concern that you're going to get to DC and somehow this place is going to change you, and despite how hard you try? And I've seen this happen to a lot of people. They get here, they have their hearts in the right place, they have really good intentions, and this place can just suck the life out of you. And how do you stick to what you really believe in your heart, and not let the swamp suck you down?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the incredible opportunity that I had in 2003 to move back to my hometown, because that changed me as a meteorologist. When now it was the city and the people that supported me. That's when I started giving back. That's when I started doing things like Project Tornado, being involved in the boards of nonprofits, right? And I think for me, going to Congress from this point is just a continuation of the communication job that I've had. And I think what's important is to also, I'll always remember that, I am going to be the representative, or hopefully, fingers crossed, be the representative for my hometown. And that those are the people that I work for. I won't ever work for a political party. I won't ever work for an establishment. My website isn't even Eric for Congress. It's ericforillinois.com, because I won't ever work for them. I am very, very steadfast in the fact of who I work for, and that if I should be chosen to be in the U.S. House of Representatives, that what, tax dollars are paying my salary, and I won't ever forget that part. And I think that all goes back to the fact that I got to work in my hometown for 11 years and then be here for 8.
Are there any particular pieces of legislation or areas that you're really want to focus on as far as sponsoring bills or things like that? Is it a convective focus, or are you interested in more in like authorizing or appropriating? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I've had some discussions with folks in Congress about this, and I really believe that my role isn't going to be as much legislative as it will be in communicating, because I've talked with other Congress people who are in the science field. And when they hear, wait a minute, you have a background in television meteorology, we need that because we don't have the communicator right now. And so what it's going to be is, when we do get a bill, when we do have to move on something, or when there's a lack of movement on something, it's making sure that communication is there. Because I don't know about you or anyone else watching this, but it sure seems like there's a lack of communication coming out of Washington these days. And I'm not talking about the people that write nasty tweets just to get themselves in the news. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are the communicators of what's going on in Washington, how it's affecting the people.
I love that is your focus. That's something I've thought about a lot. It really is such a secretive process in so many ways. In part, for some people, for some members of Congress, they do that because of the strategizing behind the scenes. They don't want to tip their cards. But what you really end up with is this feel, of disconnect between the members of Congress and their constituencies. And so going in with that view, how is it people gain trust that's been lost in an institution? You gain trust by having a conversation, having more in, that direct input. So I really think that's a lovely perspective to bring to the thing. And, just that you were going into it with that view.
Yeah, and I'll take you back, and this was only a couple of weeks ago. I was in the produce section at the Jewel, which is the grocery store down the street, and this senior citizen, she came up and she tapped me on the shoulder like a grandmother would do, right? And I said, "Hi, how are you?" And she goes, "Oh, I miss watching you on Channel 8." And it turns out, we had a great conversation. Her name is Betty. And Betty said, she goes, "Eric, you just had a way of explaining how the weather works. And I missed that." And I said, "Well, Betty," I said, "it was a great run, wasn't it? We had a good time." And then she goes, "Well, Eric, I thank you." And she goes, "I just can't wait for you to explain how Congress works." And she walked away. and I just sat there and I put both of my hands on the cart and I thought, what did she just tell me? What is her expectation that I have to? So here it is, though. Betty's expectation for me in Congress is to communicate it to her. Like, that's what we need.
And Eric, if you can explain that, would you mind coming back on WeatherBrains maybe sometime in the future and spend an hour and a half?
Please.
Yeah.
I love it.
You know, as we, you know, working in this field where we're dealing with uncertainty and risk and multiple people's opinions, and you know, it's probably a really good background for getting into that kind of swampy mess and trying to make sense of it.
Yep.
One thing I did learn, and this was a great thing. I did some long form journalism. I got a couple of months. This was maybe 5-6 years ago now. I got to do a for those of you in television, it was a sweep story, but I got about 3 months to work on this, and it was why people push back against the idea of climate change. And so I went to Iowa State, talked to Dr. William Gutowski about climate. And he said, yeah, we're putting energy into the system. We're going to get more energy out. Then I went down and talked to Dr. Wendy Wiegert at Bradley University in Peoria. But she really, really said something that made it connect to me. She said, Eric, there's very few people that know a lot about a lot of different things. And she goes, if you are that person, you're on Jeopardy and you're winning. Okay. But she goes, for most of us, we know a lot about very few things. Okay. And so she goes, for you, you know a lot about meteorology. She goes, I know a lot about sociology. Right. But she goes, here's the problem with society is she goes, well, we don't know a lot about a lot of different things. Where are our opinions on those things? We have to understand that if we know a lot about a certain thing, we can have a big opinion on it. Okay. But if we know very little about a specific thing, we probably should have a little opinion on it. And I thought about that ever since that time.
Man, that's great wisdom. If you could bring that to the Hill, that would be extraordinary. That would be an amazing advance for all of us. I really appreciate all of these views, and I think I want to emphasize something that Neil said. It'd be really, really neat for you to engage with the AMS policy program, and if you can do the colloquium, one of the things that you would experience if you do get the chance to make it to Congress. There are certain kinds of educational checkpoints that you will hit on your way in the door, and one of those comes through the Library of Congress. And there's someone there who is just this excellent, incredible resource who, at least when as a couple of years ago, I hope this is still the truth, that she was the person that every member of Congress, everyone who's elected, has to go before this person to get trained in sort of what your job is around here. And this, my advice to you is, if you encounter this person, never act like you know it all. So have that mentality of what you're doing right now, where you're saying, I don't know, and be comfortable saying that in this space. That is the right answer for her, by the way. And that's probably the right answer for a lot of things early on, if you were to get into this position. But it is really, really interesting if you get to be in that cohort, just to see, people who have never been in a science policy space pretend what they think they know. And you need those people who will put you sort of in that spot of, you need to be able to learn here. And there's so much to learn about. And the thing I found so challenging but fun and wonderful about being in DC is that there is just an infinite amount to know. And when I was able to come forward and just say, I need to learn, and ask the thing that sounds like the stupid question, all the doors opened. And I think that that's a wonderful mentality, to come in with, is that piece of wisdom. If you know a lot, have a strong opinion. If you don't yet know a whole lot, try to stave off that opinion and learn more and talk to more people, which it sounds like you're great at doing. You're talking to a lot of scientists. How heartening for us that that's something that you want to bring and a kind of wisdom you want to bring. And you'll encounter so many kinds of wisdom if you get to have this position and so much to learn. But if you can go through that colloquium process, before hitting that role, you can get a taste of that. And I think that would be terrific. It is something the AMS offers and just an incredible opportunity.
Oh, thank you for that, Kim. And thank you, Neil, for talking about it as well. And it begs another addendum to this is, we in meteorology, we will never promise anything. We'll only tell you a percentage chance, right? And so going to Congress, I will never promise anything. But I will give people that there's a 40% chance that that's going to happen.
That would be hilarious.
They're going to love that.
Right? Yeah, I think people will either love or hate that, like the legislative forecast. I give this, his forecast after being in the office for a year, they go from like, 50-50 down to like 0.5% for literally everything as we watch him calibrate to DC. I think that would be a really fun thing to see you evolve and do. And I would actually just love to see the reaction of other members of Congress to you doing that. I think it's the kind of idea that has the possibility of catching on. So very, very cool. Well, I want to offer an opportunity for anybody else who wants to chime in here with any other questions for you. But I think one of the things I'd love for you to have the opportunity to offer to our audience is, as if you were to transition into this role, what do you think would be your most, at least off the bat, the kind of issue space you would want to dive into that's relevant to our field? Would it be about getting, meteorological equipment out into the field? Are you interested in, looking at these spaces where hazards meet society and some of the policies and, communicating about what is going on in Congress, what isn't going on in Congress, and why, where is it that we would look for you to start diving in?
Yeah, I think for me, it's looking at hazards and policy like that. We have to understand where there are cracks in the communication, and we've got to fill those in. And I think my role is going to be the communicator of what we collectively in the weather field are going to need. And it's not just an immediate thing. It's not just what we need today. It's what we're going to need 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And that's one thing that it's hard, I think, for people in my neighborhood here to, we all want immediate results. But I think what we need to be doing more of, not just in the science of meteorology, but what we need to do more of everywhere else is plan farther in advance. And that's hard when, in Congress, the term is 2 years. I've talked with a lot of Congress people and they say, Eric, it's, you're going to go to Washington, you're going to work for a year, and then you're going to work to get reelected again so that you can continue on what you started. And so that is something that, it takes time, it takes effort, but it takes communication too. And so it's to be able to communicate where we need. And also, to be honest with you, my role is going to be to appropriate. We need to make sure that we get what we need out of the budget to go to Noaa and the National Weather Service.
Well, that's great. I think, that's really well taken. It might be something where people are going to be following and watching as you go through this process, to not expect miracles as soon as you walk in the door, and you're going to take your time to build up that knowledge and build up that capacity to make that difference that you'd be looking to make. And it is a totally different game, but in some ways, it's probably similar to what you experienced when you started as a broadcast meteorologist, getting to know the places you were working in and building that community trust, right?
And you're exactly right. It's learning. It's the process of learning how it works, learning maybe how it doesn't work. and coming up with ideas. But if you don't have people that are going there with an open mind to learn and to try to understand, then where are we all going to be? We need to make sure that our elected leaders are going to take that role of learning how to connect people back home.
So where does it go from here, Eric? You're going to run for president here? I mean, what are you going to do in 10 years? What's the end game here? Come on now. What is the end game? Everybody's got an end game.
I'm going to be honest with you, James, because I believe, so we haven't had a meteorologist in Congress in 50 years. My goal is to figure out the path, okay, to get to Congress so that in 2 years, there's a challenge for one or two other meteorologists in the country to do the same thing, okay? And then 2 years after that, maybe there's 4 or 5. Think about it. I mean, this isn't that long into the future, okay? What happens if in 10 or 12 years, we have a whole group of meteorologists, of science communicators, the people that are trusted in their hometowns with the information, that go to Washington after having the ethics of being in journalism, right? Where are we going to be then? And so that's my goal. My goal isn't to be anywhere different than where I am today. The way that I think about this job, if the voters here in Northwestern Illinois, if they say, yep, he gets to have this job, I think about it this way. I'm just working remotely from home. This is home, and I'm going to work remotely in DC, and have it make sense to them. So
the big question is too, are you going to do map briefings when Congress is in session before it starts every morning?
We should.
I think
all
you
right, ladies,
should.
I mean, the Diamondbacks maps. Let them come down.
Can I just say that is something that is sorely needed. Somebody needs to do that. When I started working as a congressional fellow, I was in the office. It was October 2nd, I think, was the day that I started in the office. And you can get in the fall in the Delmarva Peninsula, you can get some convective events where you get those little, spin ups. And there was a tornado watch in effect for our area in my first week. And I went to the legislative director and I just sort of said, okay, there's tornado watch. What do we do? And he was, I worked for a senator from Oregon, and all these people are from Oregon, like from Portland. They have no awareness of what this entails, and very little concern for it. And he just said, we keep working. We keep going. And I said, okay, well, great. And was just kind of flustered and went back to my desk and was learning about everything that I didn't know about Congress. And then we got a tornado warning that was just to our west, the county just to our west. And this storm went on to produce a tornado. It came into Alexandria. There was a brief week tornado that was just south of Capitol Hill. And when that storm was off to our west, then I timidly went back to the LD and asked, okay, so now what do we do? And he said, we wait for a signal from there's this internal security system, an all hazards threat notification system that they use in the Senate and in the House. They have different systems that notify them, because there wasn't any sort of routine way of really getting information. Otherwise, if we need to shelter, they'll let us know. They never let me know. And the tornado was really close. And I was a little anxious about how that all unfolded. And we talk a lot in meteorology about populations. We have things like migratory populations. We talk about elderly populations moving to Florida and not being adapted to hurricanes, and being disconnected from those notification systems, all of that. We talk about migrant communities coming from Central and South America into the States and having no idea about severe weather at all, and bringing their disaster subculture knowledge that may or may not be applicable to these other hazard areas. And I saw that in abundance in DC. It's a whole city filled with people who have never been in that climate, and who maybe have never experienced these hazards. And they get maybe this, there's an email that comes from Noaa through their congressional affairs person that kind of gives the high level forecast of the day. And it's just sort of this, like, here's some SPC stuff, here's, like a discussion, and oh my gosh, no one in Congress is, I'm sorry, there are people, I'm sure. I'm not going to besmirch my wonderful Noaa. I'm sure there are people who read every word of that. These people are also quite busy, and so sometimes they don't read the whole thing. Sometimes, if there is a weather event for the day. So I see a really big opportunity here, Eric, to do something where maybe you can, being a meteorologist in Congress, maybe you can make people aware of their own environment.
I would say that our elected leaders need to read all of the bills, much like we meteorologists read the tag at the very bottom that says tornado observed.
That's a great byline.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Neil,
it is
can't you
universe.
fix this? I mean, Neil, can't you fix this now? I mean, come on, man. You're like in the middle of all this. I mean, you could do a mad briefing now.
I was doing a bipartisan forecast for everybody up here. I finally had to draw the line at, I'm not doing like outdoor campaign events. I don't care who you are, what your party is. But someone could do that, and they could probably make a fair amount of money.
Ooh, there you go.
I'll tell you what, yeah, all these members of Congress, they fly back to their districts, usually on Thursday evening, and come back on Monday. And there are a lot of people who need to know, is it safe for me to get to the airport? What's the chance of this flight getting delayed or taking off? I'm sure in the COVID era, all of that's even more complicated. But yeah, what Neil's describing, I became similar when people learned that I had the background. I have all these staffers, who just kind of message and say, oh, Senator so-and-so needs to get, to X place. Do you think that that's a good idea? Da, 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 da. And I'm just like, I've got to do this other stuff. I haven't looked at the weather today, and I'd have to sit there and actually forecast. And there's definitely, I think you're right. There's a business here for someone who's enterprising.
I'll tell you a funny story about commuting on a plane next to a representative. I was, and I'm not going to tell you who this was, but we were in some pretty.
Oh yeah, this is going to be a good story.
Yeah, we were in some pretty severe turbulence, and this person was white knuckled on the seat, and I had my laptop open, and I was actually working on the in-car's old GTG, that graphical turbulence guidance it's a combination of several different algorithms that look at eddy dissipation rate and everything else. And this person was like, what do you do for a living? I was like, I study turbulence. And they were like, well, is this bad turbulence or good turbulence? I was like, what you should do when you get home, I should have said if you get home, is go look at these stress test videos of these commercial airliners and how far they can bend the wings up before they snap, because there's no way there's going to be anything goes wrong with this. And I should have said, hey, you know who funds all this great research?
Yeah.
Just NOAA and the National Science Foundation. And boy, we could do a lot better forecast with a lot more money.
I want to be on the plane next time when Neil says, if we get through this. I just want to be around. I want to be around that happens.
Note to self, never fly with Neil.
Never.
Or be on a boat with Neil, or if you get through this.
Yeah, get through it. Yeah.
Hey, Eric, let's say you get elected. What's your greatest fear? What's the one thing that you fear going into a new position like this? Everybody fears something when you go into something brand new.
Maybe letting people down. When I'm one of those people that I've always, before election day, I go and I research who these people are. I come with a note in my hand, so I know who I'm voting for. But I really believe in our country, voting is something that is so important. It's too important to not do, in my opinion. But when people fill in that oval, next to my name, that I'm going to be the only representative in Congress for that. And so I think the worst thing for me is, not living up to their expectation. Betty in the store, right? It's making sure that I'm doing what she hopes that I can do for her. And so I think that's my biggest fear, because it's not so much that I'm worried about what's next, because I know I'm not alone. That there's a group of people and we're working together. We're all in a team. And so that's the great thing to know, that I'm not alone. And you know what, there's supporters. I mean, one of the things that was a little bit hard at the beginning, and I didn't really touch on this too much, was, there's a reason why we get lawyers that go to Congress. It's not that we need lawyers to write the laws, but it's lawyers support lawyers. And that's one thing that, not having a meteorologist in Congress for 50 years, it's been a little bit of a struggle getting meteorologists to support meteorologists. And maybe our distrust of politics, like we want to say, oh, I can't do anything with politics. So this isn't about politics. This is about the support of the science, more often than that. But yeah, I think it's making sure that I live up to the expectation that Betty has for me.
So you guys know, if Eric wins, every meteorologist that's going to Congress has to come through this show. Okay, we've learned that tonight. So Eric has put out a challenge. He wants some other meteorologists to run for office. So Kim, when do you run?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. No, I oh my gosh, but there are some days where I feel exactly like Eric, where I just look at this and I go, oh, if someone needs to do something to make this better, and man, I'd love to do that. But for me, in part, it comes down to, I couldn't do that to my family. I couldn't do that to my kids. It's tough right now. And if you want, something, I guess, just to think about, if you want good elected leaders, you kind of have to treat people well who get into those positions, because if you have people who are loving, caring, people who look at that whole life proposition and ask themselves, is this something I could do? And this is the vitriol that they can expect, then they're not going to be the people who want to run. Yeah. And that's part of why I feel so proud of you, Eric, for being willing to go through this. And you have such a positive, delightful attitude. And I hope that carries you. And I hope that it can be something that we can look to as an inspirational model. If there are those of us who feel that calling to try to do something, whether it's locally or nationally, to help make all of this better, that it would be lovely if that could be successful for you.
Thank you for that. I mean, while we all share our love of meteorology, for me, it's being trusted for the communication, and maybe we don't take as much stake in when people make the choice to invite us into their homes, to take shelter based on what a meteorologist says, including the National Weather Service. When the phone goes off and it says that the tornado is observed, it's taking that one step further. And now it's not going to be just for weather. It's going to be how their government works or doesn't work for them. But communication and being trusted with that information is the most important thing that I can do from this point forward.
I've had groups over the years to try and get me to run for office. Number one, I'm not going to do it. I'm not called to do it. It's a calling. I think it is a calling, and I'm not called to do it. But I nothing personal, but I cannot run as a Republican or a Democrat. I just can't. I would be an independent. And all the big money flows into those other two, and I would never have a chance. But again, it's just not my calling. So, Eric, you've responded to the call, and it takes guts to walk away from something you've done for a long time. So, that is a very admirable thing. And like Kim says, everybody criticizes politicians. I mean, there's a gazillion. There's more politician jokes than weatherman jokes, and so. But somebody's got to do it. I mean, it is an essential part of government. Somebody's got to be willing to make the sacrifice, and somebody's got to be willing to do it. So anybody that is willing to walk away from a career like you've had and go for it, that's an admirable thing to do.
And thank you, James.
But Julie,
And just adding on to what you just said, some people have said, well, why didn't you get a job, as a state rep before you're running for Congress? Well, it doesn't make sense to do that. I'm not a politician. I'm coming from the background of science right to Congress. That's what we need. That's the most important thing for me, is to not be attached, but like you said, I mean, there's two political parties in this country, and, many people say, I wish there were three, I wish there were four. Well, the people that say that, make it happen. Maybe we would be better with three.
Maybe we can start our third, but maybe not. I'll let somebody else do that. We got to pause here, Erica. So hang tight. We're going to do picks of the week here in a minute. And let me just say that Jen is out this week, so we don't have a This Week in Tornado History. And Tony is out this week. We don't have his report, but I do see, Bill Murray, that Bruce is on the line. So let you bring in Bruce Jones, and let's talk a little bit about weather radios. And we're going to come back and do a weather roundup and do picks of the week. So, Bill, the floor belongs to you, sir.
Well, I'll tell you what, once we get this weather party started, because I think that if every one of our meteorologists went out and ran for Congress, we would have a new flood tide of political astuteness in Washington, D.C. And when that happens, if and when that happens, Bruce Jones will be the national ambassador to weather radio for sure. We can make that a position, an official one. At that point, he already has it at this day. I've been looking back to all these tornadoes that have happened in history, Bruce Jones, because I get the privilege of writing for our wonderful newsletter that the WeatherBrains newsletter that Jen Nairmore curates every week. And this is, of course, prime time, middle of May here for big historical tornadoes. And I saw an interesting thing that popped into view today, and that was that the Kalamazoo tornado in May of 1980, passed directly over the American Bank building. There was a barograph in that building that dropped 0.69 inches during the passage of the tornado. But the thing I had missed, there was an elementary school that was destroyed during that tornado. And somehow someone had sent all those children home an hour before the tornado got there. So I don't know what the forecast was, if they had a weather radio in Kalamazoo in 1980, but I know that our schools really rely on Noaa weather radio. Just one of the institutions that, that need to have a weather radio that's monitored, in that facility the entire time it's occupied.
Yeah. And, the federal government gave a weather radio to every public and private school in America back in 2006 and 2007. So that was a free thing, and every school got one, and you could walk into any school principal's office, and there it was in the front office. Well, those radios are, 15 years old plus, and they really need to be replaced. And so I was just talking within the last week with a head of a school district that's buying radios to replace all the weather radios in their school district. And I think it's out in California, as I recall. I think it was somebody out at a conference in San Diego last week. So a lot of the school administrators know that those radios serve a very valuable purpose, and they know that it is time to replace those, or at least check on them, make sure they're still working properly. But the idea is to give people more than one way to get warnings, and not to let anyone rely on any single source of warning information, because any source can fail in a storm. And it's important to have backups, and then backups for your backups. As I mentioned, I was in California last week, and Sonoma County's emergency manager was giving a presentation about the Tubbs fire, which was the fire that burned into the city of Santa Rosa and destroyed like 9% of the city. And that was a wind shift in the overnight hours, somewhere around midnight, 1 a.m. The wind shifted, picked up to about 35 miles an hour. And a fire that was over on the other side of the ridge at 1 o'clock in the morning came burning straight into the city of Santa Rosa. And it was a huge debacle. And one of the things they learned was you can't just rely on your cell phone. And so they've done a lot of outreach there to get people to have multiple ways of receiving these wildfire warnings and evacuation notices. And they're getting positive, extremely positive feedback from the people who say, this is what we expect our emergency management department to do for us, is provide these options, educate us about the importance of these options. So just last week, they did a test of the NOAA weather radio alerts. They sent out a civil emergency message test. All the radios went off. Everybody loved it. And it's been a big success for Sonoma County, California, as another way to alert people when these wildfires make a drastic change, perhaps in the middle of the night.
Well, Bruce, we appreciate you and Midland's support of WeatherBrains. You help make the show possible. And talk about this special offer that you got for our listeners.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is if you listen to WeatherBrains, please be a proponent for this concept of multiple and redundant ways of getting warnings. Please spread that message. It's so vitally important. And the offer for those of you who watch or listen to WeatherBrains, if you go to midlandusa.com, you can order a weather radio and get 25% off when you use the promo code SPAN25, and that's SPANN25. SPANN25 is the promo code. SPAN25 gets you 25% off of a weather radio. We just had Mother's Day. Father's Day is still coming. And, you've got a dad, maybe an uncle, a grandfather, maybe yourself, who needs to be gifted with a NOAA weather radio. And here's a great way to get one. So SPAN25 is the promo code, and you use that at midlandusa.com.
And Bruce, I'm in a school every single day, and I ask, because I have a picture of a Midland WR120 weather radio. And I say, how many of you boys and girls have one of these at your house? To me, it's astounding. Here in one of the most aggressive weather markets in the world, probably 3 in 10 at most stops, 3 in 10. That's insane. We have to do better. And I'm pretty aggressive. I'll tell those kids, now what you're going to do is go home and tell your parents today to go down and get one. And I'm pretty aggressive with it, and they'll do that. But we need everybody's help. So if you're, obviously, if you're watching or listening to this, you're a weather dweeb. You might have 3 weather radios, but you need to tell your friends and your relatives and your neighbors and everybody that needs to happen, because we've just got to get one in every home and in every business. Bruce, it's shocking to me how many businesses don't have one. And it's the same thing. So please be an ambassador. And again, that's a great chance to get 25% off. So midlandusa.com, SPAN25. But Bruce, thank you. And again, Jen is going to come back and do email next week when she's back. But I had to mention one that came in during the show. This is from Chris Musso, and he writes, during tonight's live stream, I received an email from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It linked to today's Across the Sky podcast on how do people react to severe weather alerts, featuring Kim as their guest. Yes. And so I've yet to listen to it, but here's the URL, and we'll put that in the show notes. So Kim, you were on the Across the Sky show. When did you record that?
That was just a couple of days ago. I'm glad that they got that up. It was just the end of last week.
Awesome. So we'll put a link in. In fact, I should make that my pick of the week, but we're going to morph into picks of the week here because it's kind of getting late. Have you guys seen the video from Andover from the school system that they released, the surveillance camera video?
Crazy.
Just absolutely stunning. It's mesmerizing. But if you've not had a chance to see it, it's a link to their YouTube page, the Andover Schools, and this surveillance camera video of the Andover tornado here.
Why does that video go pink in the middle? Is that because insulation, or did the power go out? What was one of the cameras went pink.
Yeah, I don't know. I would.
I'm thinking
it's a hardware issue or something. I don't know.
I've seen that happen with the power issues. Is the power for some reason it affects the cameras? I've seen that happen before.
All right. Well, Troy, while you got the floor, what's your pick of the week?
Oh, pick of the week. I thought we were going to do like what was going on around weather-wise around here, which is nothing. And so that means then, James, that you reach your finger over there by that button.
Oh, Troy beat me to the foghorn.
No, you're right. We can just kind of do a weather roundup as we go here, but again, quiet. But the New Mexico situation looks pretty bad to the west of you.
Yeah, up in I guess Kim is kind of in the northeast or eastern parts of New Mexico.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And and hopefully maybe they can get some rain, but it looks like severe weather out in West Texas and eastern New Mexico in the next couple of days, over the next 2 days. But around Austin, 95, 96, 97, we're loving it. May actually in Austin tomorrow, at least, well, Camp Mabry and at Bergstrom may hit a record for tomorrow for the high temperature. Has more to do with the fact that the records for the 10th day of May are a little lower, more than anything else, because they go back up by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But it's summertime in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I got this Omega block thing going on here. And again, for us, the death ridge is set in. So we got for where we are, you can stick a fork in the tornado season, I think.
Well, no, I was looking at, I was looking over in your neck of the woods last night. It's like 65 degrees or something like that at 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. And I'm sitting there going, come on, man. Bring some of that.
We had a nice breeze today. So it was
very
wonderful.
Very refreshing. Just great. All right.
How about 6.9 inches of snow at Bozeman, Montana today to give us a little wistful thinking there?
Did you also see that? Come on. Out at in McKinley, Denali, actually. I don't know if y'all saw the tweet from the state climatologist up in Alaska, but they had about 4.5 inches of snow on Denali at the base of Denali earlier today. And that's one of the latest, heaviest snows of that amount up in central Alaska for this date. You know, the season's kind of wrapping up there, but they actually had about 4.5 inches of snow on Denali at the base earlier today.
This, for those that are watching, this was Park City, Utah today. And if you want to get your picture on television, the spam shout out works every time. I'm just saying. I love it. You want to get it on the tweeter, the face bag, the gram. You do that.
Well, what you should have done, James, is you should have said this was up at Denali. I mean, you'd be international. You'd be Alaska.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, it is underneath that trough. It is cold and snowy. But all right, Kim, what's your pick of the week? Go.
Sorry, I had to unmute really quick. I sort of tipped my hat toward the pick of the week a little bit earlier in the show, but my pick is WREX Remembering Jeannie Hayes, and that was co-anchored by Eric. And so just if you want to see more of who this person is as a person from, it's 10 years ago now, but I think that it gives you a really nice summary of who he is.
Awesome. And again, all of these picks will be up on weatherbrains.com. Dr. Neil Jacobs, do you have a pick for us, sir?
I do. So my pick of the week is the EPIC workshop. It is a short course put on by AMS. It's running the Unified Forecast System short range weather app in Amazon Cloud. And it's June 6th from 11 to 3 p.m. Registration is open online now. You can find the link on our website. You can go look at AMS. It is absolutely free for student members until May 17th. So register now, it's free. The Amazon Cloud Compute will also be free. Super excited that we are going to be able to take everyone straight through downloading, compiling, and running their weather model on the cloud.
Wow. In
4 hours or less.
Ooh. This is good geeky stuff right here. That's outstanding. That is just excellent. And you say for an AMS student member between now and the 17th of May, it doesn't cost anything. If you sign up now.
If you register before the 17th of May, registration's free. For regular non-student members, it's $32, and for non-members, it's $100.
All right, that's a bargain of a lifetime. Awesome. All right, so let's go to Bruce. Bruce, what you got for us this week?
Well, I had the joy of working with Eric in the aftermath of the Parkersburg, Iowa F5 tornado when we did weather radio outreach around the Quad Cities and the Rockford area. And boy, the response from people was huge after that tornado, because that was a huge success story for the National Weather Service. The people in Parkersburg had 26-minute lead time on that tornado warning, 26 minutes. So when we talk about success stories, this is one of the biggies. That's Butler County, and that's in the Des Moines CWA, County Warning Area. So that's Des Moines office. Tremendous job up there at Parkersburg. So Eric, I recall quite fondly working with you on some of these things, but National Weather Service website has, the stats page on that. And I'll send you the link to the Parkersburg EF5 of May 25, 2008, 14 years ago this month.
Awesome. Okay. And so, Eric, that's leading into you. Give us a pick of the week. Give us something good.
All right. My pick of the week is I'm going to tell you what to say back to people who say, oh, you've got the job where you get paid to be wrong every day. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah. You're wrong 99% of the time and you still get paid. Yeah.
All right. So I think that most people forget that we only observe the bottom of the weather. Okay. So just if it was even possible to go and stand at the bottom of the ocean, 35,000 feet down, which it's not even possible. If it was possible to go stand down at the bottom of the ocean and then look up and see, wow, there's where all of that is moving right now. Then think about how hard it would be, or how easy, to forecast where's that water going to be in 7 days.
Yeah.
That's what it's like forecasting the weather for a precise spot here underneath the ocean of the atmosphere.
That's
When you say that to them, they're going to be like, oh, I didn't
That'll
know.
shut them up.
What?
That's why we love you, Bill.
Yeah. All right. No, that's outstanding. Wow.
I'm using that one.
about it
I
like
wrote that one down.
All right, Bill Murray, go, man. Pick and
Yeah, James,
what's
can I
coming
share
up?
my screen for my pick of the week?
You should be able to share away. Go.
Are you ready? Let me find him here. I lost him.
How many tabs
God,
could you have
darn
open?
it, I lost
Whoa!
it. Yeah.
I've never seen anybody with this many tabs in my life. What is that? Wow,
Oh, man. Well, I kind of blew that because what I had picked to share with you did not appear. So, James, I'll take the foghorn and I'll try again next week.
Wow.
Gosh, I guess we're lucky that's what was up on the page.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it might have been nightcallnurses.com or something.
Well, no, it's just the menu at Wesley's. That's what we keep up on.
Yeah,
over
that's
here.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about next week's show, though, James. We have a deep dive into the monthly weather review. Its history. It's 150 years old this year. Of course, it's had a big impact and a big legacy. Chief editor of the monthly weather review, David Schultz, will join us, along with weather historian and meteorologist Sean Potter, an old friend of the show. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that.
Awesome. So I think we're done here. So again, Eric, thank you for coming on the show. And again, thank you for, we got through the whole show without getting into hot button political topics. We talked weather, which was just outstanding. So thank you. Thank
you for the opportunity to sit here. And I will just say, one of the things that I've learned real quick is we are so much better when we speak about our values instead of our politics. Values over politics every day.
Yeah,
and I think you got to go get that train out of the tunnel, Eric. I got to see your model train run for the
Yeah. For those that are watching, this is an amazing set.
There's the sun. There's the sun.
Unbelievable. Wow. All right. We got to put a bow on this thing here. So for those that are new, we typically do the show every Monday at 8:00 Eastern, 7:00 Central. A lot of people watch, but most of you listen. We know that. You can watch at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. But for those that listen, thank you too. And if you'd like to get a note to us, an email, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Jen will be back next week. We'll do an extra long email segment. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless everybody. Thank you, Eric. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Eric.
That was fun.
And fix that circulation on that tornado, Eric.
I know. Also, I don't know if it was something I said 11 years ago, but it's nice to be invited back after 11 years of a hiatus. I don't even remember.
Oh my goodness, you were an alum and we didn't even recognize that? How terrible.
Bill is our GBO, so he's whatever good or bad, it's all Bill. So. We'll blame it on Bill.
Eric, I'm just really quickly going to say.
July 25th, 2011. That is crazy. And it was all about Project Tornado. How awesome. Well, welcome back.